how great salespeople are normally great leaders. And the reason why great salespeople are great leaders is because they create agency in their customers. They create agency in the people that they are selling to. So while a lot of great salespeople, especially in real estate, have all the answers, what the unsold have realized over time is that to be the smartest person in the room, you have to actively try not to be the smartest person in the room.
The management and transparency is what's very important. So once you submit a referral, you're going to have your own Home Advantage account, and it's going to tell you where everything sits. So if you have 10 referrals that you've sent into the network, it's going to give you all 10 referrals. It's going to tell you every milestone that that client is sitting in, whether they're touring homes, whether they're in escrow. And you now can manage through the Home Advantage application as far as what your pipeline looks like for the referrals that you've sent. And so it's pretty sophisticated, and it's all click of a button, guys.
Hi there, everybody. It's Ruth Katchen, and I have the most wonderful guest today that I could ever imagine. I mean, probably. Anyway, it's Colin Coggins and Garrett Brown, the authors of the Unsold Mindset, redefining what it means to sell. And I can tell you a little bit about how I met them. Actually, our wonderful Tristan Amata interviewed them on his Brilliant Thoughts podcast. And I heard this and I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. This was prior to the book coming out. And then when their book came out, I got the audio version and listened to it an embarrassing number of times, I would say. It's plural, but definitely embarrassing. And because they don't address real estate specifically, but they do address sales. And since I've been in sales and real estate, and mostly I'm selling people on doing what they do and doing it better by education and training, the whole idea of sales in real estate, if you don't sell something, you don't have a business. So we have to generate clients, and like most sales, but people don't have a job and then, do either better or not better anyway. And I think that because real estate is an emotionally driven purchase, we need to teach people how to do this and talk to people in not such a canned way. So anyway, here are Garrett and Colin. And I'll let them each talk a little bit about themselves and the book and whatever they want to do. And if you have questions, please jump in and put them in the chat. And I guess I feel free to interrupt and ask something that intrigues, if that's okay. Anyway, hi guys, happy to see you.
Thank you, Ruth. That was awesome. What's up, Colin?
How are you, bud?
Excellent. I'm excited here. We only have about 30 minutes to talk today, which for us is a very short amount of time. We teach a class at USC called Sales Mindset for Entrepreneurs. We teach for 32 hours a semester. You will soon learn that my friend Colin loves to tell a really long story that maybe could be a little shorter, but we're still going to have fun with that. And so 30 minutes for us is tight. So what we're going to do, I think, Colin, unless you tell me you want to do something different, is just try to squeeze as much as we possibly can into about 30 minutes here. And then we will leave about 15 minutes for Q&A. If that's not enough time to get what you all are here hoping to get out of this, we are very easy to find online and we can continue the conversation elsewhere. But that is my plan. What do you think, Colin?
I just hope everybody noticed that you made fun of me and then asked me for my opinion afterwards. That's what I have to do.
That's our relationship. It's we would not be having fun if I wasn't teasing you. You weren't teasing me, and we weren't then, asking each other questions afterwards.
Right. So, let's dig in. I'm excited.
Yeah, let's dig in. So that introduction was excellent, Ruth. I think the only thing to just really fill in is that Colin and I are both longtime sales and revenue leaders in a variety of spaces. We met at a company that we helped lead to an acquisition by Google. And after that, we started speaking about the things that we did and how we were able to do it. And that led to the class that I just mentioned at USC that we created. It's called Sales Mindset for Entrepreneurs. And we love teaching that class. And the class led to the book that Ruth talked about, The Unsold Mindset. And we've just been on this crazy journey. And as we've been on this journey, we've been learning so many things that we are excited to share with people like you all. So The journey started out really, Colin, with us trying to figure out the mindset of great sellers, great salespeople, really. We started talking to salespeople at companies like Cisco and Adobe and, traditional companies that were selling traditional goods and services. And we would have these amazing interviews and dig into how these people were thinking. And then we would ask them at the end of each interview, we would say, who's the greatest salesperson you know? And immediately they were answering us with people who were not quote unquote salespeople. They were giving us real estate agents and artists and authors and actors and military generals and cupcake shop owners and everything in between. And we would then go and talk to these people and talk to them about the selling, however they kind of framed it in their mind that they do. And they were all sounding exactly the same. These most successful people in whatever industry they were in were sounding exactly the same, even though they were different. And so we started collecting all these things. And our plan here today is to give you, like I said, as much in the next now 24 minutes, 25 minutes as we possibly can of the things that we learned from all of these people. So Colin, I will pause there, let you jump in, and then we can kind of dig into the good stuff.
I hope everybody remembers that he said that Colin talks a lot, just so that we can set this reference.
We're gonna check back in 20 minutes and see if that comment holds up.
Let's cut to the good part, because the book, listen, the book's 250 pages. You could listen to it at 2x on Audible and get a lot out of it. But if we only have $1 in a minute, what we found was that the greatest salespeople on the planet are the exact opposite of who most people think they are. So like in our keynotes, we ask people these two questions that Garrett was referring to. The first question is, what do you think of when you hear the word salesperson? And they say yucky and obnoxious and pushy and door knocker and used car salesperson. And then when we ask, who's the greatest salesperson you can think of? The top two answers are Martin Luther King Jr. and Steve Jobs. A close third is always like a daughter or a son or a spouse. So there's this incongruence immediately on who people think a great salesperson is, and who people like actually think a great salesperson is. Like, so you think that a great salesperson is someone that's pushy and yucky and smarmy, but when we ask you the greatest salesperson that you think of someone that you admire or that you admire and that you revere. And so that goes into some really key learnings. And Garrett, I think where we start is this idea of how great salespeople are normally great leaders. And the reason why great salespeople are great leaders is because they create agency in their customers. They create agency in the people that they are selling to. So while a lot of great salespeople, especially in real estate, have all the answers, what the unsold have realized over time is that to be the smartest person in the room, you have to actively try not to be the smartest person in the room. Like, people don't actually want you to have all the answers. People would rather engage with a learner. We're talking to the greatest salespeople on the planet, and they're telling us that their favorite 3 words are "I don't know," because going out and fighting for their clients and fighting for answers and fighting for resources, they were getting more credit for that than they were just having the answers. So this like weird duality around who people expect you to be in your profession and who they hope you are, like, became very real to Garrett and I, like, very quickly, when we were like, why is it that you're so good? And they would say, I don't know. And then they would just start showing these pieces of themselves that most of us try to hide. So Garrett, I think, like, to draw on like a single point here, I think we should talk about hyper authenticity and how the greatest sellers on the planet are very, very good at making sure that people see themselves in them, and vice versa, that they see themselves in the people they're talking to.
Yeah, let's definitely start there. When Colin's talking about these people not having all the answers, and that salesperson box that we think we have to fit in, that person has all the answers. But all of these people that we spoke to, whatever their role was, they didn't care about that stuff. And the reason that we call our book The Unsold Mindset is because all of these great sellers and great leaders and great movers of people, they're unsold on who they're supposed to be. They're unsold on who the people around them expect them to be. They're unsold on the way they're supposed to do things. And they think outside of whatever box they put themselves into. And so, we've spoken a lot with Ruth. We have a lot of friends who are in the real estate industry, and we know that there's sometimes this pressure to act a certain way, to do a certain thing. And so I think, Colin, a great place to start, like you said, is that hyper authenticity and some of the things that these great people are able to do to allow themselves to step out of that and not do the things that they're supposed to do.
Yeah. So for real estate specifically, this is always a really interesting conundrum that we run into, which is, what you get paid to do and what you love doing are not always the same thing. And there's a lot of layers to what you do. And what we're finding, and look, but we have the advantage of talking to some of the greatest sellers on the planet, but there was a common theme, which was they were very, very intentional about the pieces of their business that they did not love, that did not give them energy. And they were able to create an infrastructure where they could be intelligently and intentionally ignorant to the parts of their business that like you really had to pay them a lot of money to do. But because of that, they were also very aware of what they loved about their business, what they would do for free. And you see them sort of like create these teams around them. We talked to, who do we talk to? Selling Sunset, Jason
Oppenheimer.
Yeah. And he's in the book. And I mean, he's so smart and he talks about his background and what he loves doing. And then we get on like the topic of commercial real estate. And like, this guy's so good at like doing research and finding answers. And so he said, I could, if I want to, like have all the answers for commercial real estate and like go out and find it and like be the answer, the person that has the answers and sell a lot of commercial real estate, but I don't love it. And so because I don't love it, I let someone else who does love it own that piece of the business. And imagine a culture where what you love doing and what you're good at converge. And so, we saw a lot of that, with hyper authenticity. I think something else that we saw was impactful questions. So earlier I touched on agency. As real estate professionals, we ask a lot of questions that are going to lead us to the sale. Tell us what's important to you. Tell us what's not working. Tell us what your budget is. Show us, give us, tell us, take. Most of the time, no matter what your profession is, you're taking when you ask questions. How do you add value when you ask questions? Because we all know what it looks like to take value, right? But how do you add value by asking a question? A lot of times it's just by asking such a damn good question most people have never heard before. Not a leading question, not a question you know the answer to that they don't, a question that you really want to know the answer to that's so good and so intriguing that they've never heard it before. What happens when you ask them that question? They ideate for the first time in real time, and whatever that answer is, they take ownership of that answer. So therefore, you've created agency in the people that you are talking to the point where they feel like they are part of the decision-making process, not you, the expert knower, end-all be-all, telling someone what to do, because everyone in this room should know your customers will say no to you because you're right.
We talked to a lot of people in the real estate industry as we were putting together the curriculum for our class and putting together this book. And the difference between the okay ones and the great ones was exactly what Colin is talking about, which is giving other people agency and control over their own circumstances, over their own decisions. So we talked to a lot of real estate folks that were really focused on learning all the details about neighborhoods and homes and construction and all of these things that they could then tell to people and tell them and be the expert in the room. The greats were focused on the questions that they could ask. What did they need to know about the people that they were talking to that could make them ask the right question at the right time to have that person think in a new, interesting, different, novel way that's going to give them control of that decision. And so a lot of the stuff that we talk about in our book, in our class, in our keynotes, and that we can hopefully talk about for the next 15 minutes here today is about the difference between how you show up. It's why we talk about mindset versus tactics and how to do things a certain way. We don't talk about building rapport and overcoming objections and going in for the close. We talk about the mindset. And the reason for that is because we know, for example, what Colin's talking about, if you genuinely care about the answers to the questions that you're asking, those questions are going to sound really different than the person who asks a question because it's on a script or because they think they have to, or because they're going to try and lead somebody down a path, or they're going to show up differently if it's somebody that they're genuinely excited to help and to learn about versus just, the fifth house hunting couple that they have to talk to on a Saturday out of 8. You are going to show up differently. So Colin, I think, when you really kind of sum up that mindset, you're talking about looking for the good. And it's probably worth a story to show what we mean by that.
I will. I'll talk about Bob Dylan, and I'll preface it by just saying what I hope everyone knows, which is you will move differently if you are enamored with the person that you are talking to.
Mm.
I am not saying that you're going to be able to go and fall in love with every single prospect that you have, but I will ask you, what if you did? Like, what if you cared about your person differently than other people care about them? Like the best version of my partner, Garrett Brown, is the Garrett Brown that had, a 13-year-old crush on like this person in junior high. Like, he didn't talk more, he talked less. He asked questions he really wanted to know the answers to. When she made a joke and no one thought it was funny, Garrett didn't laugh because he wanted to make himself look good. He laughed because he was enamored with her and he actually thought that the stuff that she was saying was funny. So the question is, like, how could you possibly show up to a meeting like that? How could you show up to a meet? Like, we all know what it feels like to have a conversation with someone who's looking for the good in you, who believes in you. And we know what it feels like to get into a conversation with someone who is looking for ways to take from you. And by the way, that's the difference between great salespeople and everybody else. We smell that shit a mile away. We know when you're asking a leading question, don't do it. And we know when you're asking a question that you're dying to know the answers to that you don't know. And so I will not talk about the process because we don't have time for that. But Garrett and I have a great framework about, how you could get into a position to want to know questions that most people don't want to know.
Well, let's talk about it. If you're going to tell the Bob Dylan story, let me talk about it for just a second to set the context. It'll make the story kind of more impactful. But maybe some of you have learned a lot of people in sales professions learn what's called a 3x3, where you spend 3 minutes looking for 3 things before you get into a sales conversation, a sales meeting, a sales call. Looking for 3 things that you can use in the conversation. So it might be something that you can leverage. You research the history of the person or about their company or what they've looked for, issues that they've had in the past. The context is that you can leverage them in the conversation, almost use them against them. And we were talking about looking for the good, and that's the opposite of what we think about when we want to get into a conversation with somebody. So our version of that is that we do tell salespeople before any sales conversation or sales call to spend 3 minutes doing some research on the person or people or company that you're going to be meeting with. But instead of looking for things that you can leverage in the conversation, look for things that you genuinely love about the person you're going to talk to. And we realize that the L word can sound a little bit cringy, and we'll put it into context, I promise. But we are talking about real love. Like, what would you, the same, when I was 13 years old and that crush that I had that Colin's talking about, how do you get yourself as close to that frame of mind as you possibly can? And so before you meet with somebody or before you jump on a call with somebody, can you go online and look on their social media or look up their company or their background or their history and find things that you love about them? Maybe it's a charity that they're involved with or something, just the way it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything big, but it just the way that you show up in a conversation with somebody that you might be able to love, that you're excited to have a conversation with, you will sound so different than if you just go into a conversation with, it's another work meeting. It's another day of walking somebody around and I'm going to have these conversations. The conversation will sound different. And so now, Colin, I think it's a good time to give an example of when we did that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I would like to just put this in another way of thinking about this. It's very hard to catch a vibe, but when you catch a vibe, you catch it. Like when you are like, think of like when Ruth reached out to us. Like Ruth reached out to us out of love. She read something, she saw herself in us, and she reached out and she was talking about what was most important to her. It just so happens that it was really important to us. So like when Garrett's saying that we have a process for, getting people to a point where they show up, in love with the person that they're talking to, it's not necessarily that you are going to be in love with someone you've never met before, but you could be in love with the idea of who they are. Like Ruth could have reached out to us and we could have been horrible human beings. Like we had a ghostwriter, didn't write that, don't believe in any of it, but she was in love with the idea of who we were. And it was up to us if we were going to prove her right or prove her wrong. But when we proved her right, she asked us questions we had never heard from anybody else before. Questions that actually made us better because we hadn't thought of those thoughts before. We haven't thought those thoughts before. Anyways, and let me give you an example of this. We often, will go in and consulting clients aren't always happy to see us. Like a lot of times, like we're having conversations with leadership and then we're having conversations with teams. Sometimes they're sales teams, sometimes they're engineering teams. This one time we were talking to a leadership team and a sales team, and the leadership team said, hey, like this group is great. They're just sort of flatlining. There's only one hitter in the entire group and he's great. He's stuck in his ways, but you don't need to touch him because he's good at what he does. Just fix the other group. And we're like, well, that's going to be impossible. We're going to have to go through him. Essentially. So we get in the room and leadership was right. The group was excited to see us. The number one leader, the number one person on the leaderboard was not excited to see us. And he didn't have a problem telling us, like he didn't need us there. He was doing just fine. Look at his numbers. And we said, we got it. Do us a favor. We're going to give you a lead and we want you to try to fall in love with this lead in the next 3 minutes. And we want you to do it in front of everybody. And this is a mature gentleman, okay, who was looking at us like we were these punk kids. And he just said it. He was like, I am not going to fall in love in 3 minutes with anyone you give me. I don't need it. And we said, we got it. Just do it for everyone else. And he goes, I'm not doing it. And we're saying, please. And he goes, no, you don't understand. It's not a qualified lead. Damn it. Okay. Do it anyways. And you don't have to take the lead. Just do the exercise. He says, fine. Begrudgingly opens up his laptop and then starts to look on LinkedIn for, ways that he could quote unquote fall in love with this prospect that he wasn't even going to talk to, this lead. And about 2 minutes in, you hear this, and we go, what? And he goes, this guy graduated around the same time as me. And we go, you love that about him? And he goes, no, I don't love that about him. All right. Type. 30 seconds later. What? He went to the University of Minnesota. No, I don't love the University of Minnesota. Okay. Right when he's about to put his hands back in the laptop, he stops, looks up and goes, but Bob Dylan did go to the University of Minnesota. Bob Dylan is around my age. And yes, I love Bob Dylan. And it was perfect. Like we were like, you're done. We're good. You don't have to take this lead. You've proven to the entire team how different your mindset can be if you love the person that you're about to talk to or the idea of who they could be. And when we're about to give the lead to a different person, a newbie, actually, a rookie on the team, he wouldn't let it happen. This senior tenured salesperson said, not a chance. I didn't just spend the last 3 minutes researching this dude to not find out if he actually knew Dylan, if he was actually the guy that I thought he was. That was the point. He needed to ask questions. He needed to figure out if he was right, and he was right. And he got on that call, and the bro vibes that like are not even worthwhile of talking, like they even looked alike. Like they caught a vibe because this dude came in hot. Like, I know these things about you, but I'm about to ask you questions that no one cares about. And that guy bought. And at the end of the day, we came back, we did an after action review. And this, the senior gentleman said, hey, I just want everyone to know that that guy didn't buy because, I fell in love with him. He bought because he saw value in the product that I was selling. And Garrett and I laughed because we knew that this guy would try to dig. And we said, yeah, it makes sense, except you would have never taken that lead in the first place. And the room's like, oh, because it's true. And when you meet these people and they're like, oh, they're so good. They got that gift of gab. They sell the unsellable. It's not a gift of gab. That's not the reason that they sell the unsellable. They sell the unsellable because they show up differently than everyone else. Like we had a dude who was intentionally ignorant to data. Number one salesperson at Cisco, then was the number one salesperson at Adobe. Now he's doing crazy things at this new company. And we're like, everyone says he sells the unsellable. Why do you sell the unsellable? Why are you so good? He goes, I have no idea. Like I get a lead. I don't look at where they're from. And then I just get on the call and I try to show up and I look for the good in them. And I ask them questions that I want to know the answers to. And we're like, whoa, back up. You don't look at the data. Like you don't look where they're from. That's data that's supposed to help you sell more. And you're ignoring it. And he goes, yeah. Like the people that are going to buy like in the Northwest versus the Southeast, I know what that propensity looks like. Like I know who's going to buy more based on that data. I know I'm going to show up differently if I know where they're from. I would rather make those decisions on my own merit when I'm in the game. Intentionally ignorant to data.
So for everybody here, like how do you set up the infrastructure around you to allow yourself to be intentionally ignorant about the things that don't light you up, that you aren't as strong at, that you aren't as passionate about. You know, are there resources around you? Are there former clients? Are there people in your company or your organization? Are there just people that you know that you can bring around you to allow yourself to show up the right way, the way that you want to show up? Again, this is always about mindset and always about the way that we show up. And, you know, Colin tells this story about Bob Dylan and the fact that this guy got the deal. It doesn't just have to be a setting, a corporate setting like that. Like, we do that exercise with our class every semester, the very first night of class, the very first session of the semester. We pair people up, we sit them next to each other, we make sure that they don't know this person, and we say, you are going to have about 10 minutes to fall in love with each other. And we say the only rule is that you have to is to focus on the questions that you need to ask that person. Again, Colin talked about impactful questions. Focus on the questions that you need to ask that person in order to fall in love with them or fall in love with the idea of them in 10 minutes. And so, you know, the students always freak out, and we definitely see people rolling their eyes or bringing out their laptops saying, I thought this was a sales class. I'm going to look up what can I take instead? But they go through the exercise, and then we talk about it afterwards. And without fail, every pairing falls in love to some extent, and we talk about why. And the moment why, like every single time we say, what's the moment where you fell in love with this other person? Every single time, it's the moment that they see themselves in the other person. So they weren't asking questions that were irrelevant. They were asking questions in order to see themselves in the other person so that the other person would see themselves in them.
Which is only crazy to us because we didn't ask them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Our instructions were fall in love. You got 3 minutes, go. Here's the hint. Focus on the questions that you ask. That was it. We didn't tell them to like ask them questions that were based on what was important to them. Like, we didn't ask them to look for themselves in the person that they were talking to. They got to that conclusion on accident. Because if you only had 3 minutes to fall in love with someone, you're asking questions based on like what's important to you. So like when everyone's saying, oh, it's fate, we both transitioned from different majors, and like our parents, we were worried about how our parents were going to feel. That's because the question was, have you ever, transitioned? The point is you can't have an adversarial relationship with someone when you see yourself in them. And like, people are really, really good. Look, if people like themselves, all you have to do is prove to them that you're not perfect, because no one's perfect. Like there's a whole section in our book about vulnerability. Like, you want to say a great salesperson? I will beat you to showing you that I am imperfect the quickest. Because the minute that you know that I'm imperfect, that I'm trying to figure it out, is the minute you're like, oh shit, like you're just like me. Because no one's perfect, which is why when you see someone that has all the answers, that is too perfect and it feels too good to be true, it's because it is. And we'll say no to you because you're right. As opposed to the people that we were interviewing were talking to themselves out loud. Like, we interviewed an SVP. I mean, the dude was genius, but he was also one of the greatest salespeople in the city. And we knew he was one of the greatest salespeople in the city. So we came in with our arms up, right? With our guards up. Like, we knew we were going to talk to a great salesperson. He was going to sell us from the moment that he started talking to us. And when we asked him to introduce himself, he said, hey, my name is Jason, and I'm an SVP at, and he stopped. And he looked up at the ceiling and he said, why do I keep doing this? And he looked back at us and he said, kind of start again. And, he introduced himself differently, whatever. Garrett and I never had such a great conversation with an individual, to the point where we had to go back and look at the tape and try to figure out why we were looking for the good in him for 45 minutes straight, when everybody else we were deconstructing. And it was those damn 3 seconds. It was this micro moment of connection where we knew he was the greatest salesperson out there, or one of them. But for 3 seconds, we were like, there's no way he's selling us at that point. When he's talking to himself, he was letting us inside. He was showing his work. Like in math class, right? Like where you didn't get credit just for the answer, but you got credit for all of the stuff like in between. He was showing his work. Garrett, like, we could not unsee this. We started seeing it. Every interview we had, people figured out how to talk themselves out loud in front of us.
And that vulnerability, that giving yourself permission, we call it showing your work. That's what he did. Because remember in math class, when you didn't just get credit for the final answer, but you actually had to show the steps that it took to get there. That's basically what these people are doing. When they're stopping and they're talking to themselves out loud, they're showing their work. They're letting us in on the process. And that is a form of vulnerability. And that does lead to you showing up differently. So Colin, technically we're at the end of where we're supposed to, I promised some Q&A. I want to close with one more thing, one more topic that sort of ties the loop on the way that you show up. And that's sort of purpose and its relationship to goals. So normally when we're in a room, we can't see any of you because of this webinar software, but normally we ask people to raise their hands if they have goals. And in the rooms that we're in, almost every hand goes up. Everybody has goals. You've got a quota. You've got a quarterly goal, a monthly goal. You've got just the goals that you set for yourself in life. And then we say, okay, keep your hands up and only keep them up now if you have those goals written down and you revisit them regularly. And usually at least half the hands in the room go down. And then we say, okay, keep them up. Those half of you that still have your hands up, keep them up if you also have a purpose statement that is written down and that you look at regularly. And almost every hand in the room goes down, no matter how big. It could be a room of 10 or a room of 2,000. And there are usually just a handful of people with their hands up. And those people that have their hands still up, those purpose-driven people who have articulated and defined their purpose are oftentimes, the leaders and the biggest hitters in the room.
Mm-hmm. Ruth, do we have 2 minutes before we get into
okay. I think you can go ahead and
okay.
I have a couple of questions, but
okay, we'll end on a story about couches. I just want, like, what Garrett's saying is so important, and it goes over a lot of people's heads. Like, we are goal-oriented people, like as a profession, real estate and otherwise. Like, we're goal-oriented people, and most of us know what it feels like when we achieve our goal. And the first reaction that we have is, damn, I thought it was going to feel different. Or, this is it. Like, I thought this was going to feel different. Because the minute you get a goal, it's not like life ends. It's ephemeral, right? It's a revolving door. If I gave Garrett more time, he'd be talking about the hedonic treadmill. But, goals are just this never ending, prophecy that we're trying to fulfill that we never get a chance to. And that's because a lot of people view goals as finish lines. And what we were finding is that all of these people that we were interviewing, they looked at goals as mile markers, and they looked at their purpose as finish lines, which is great because you can't really hit your purpose. You're using words that end in ing with your purpose: serving, teaching, right? Empowering, loving. Like, your purpose is something, it's a marker, because if you're moving closer or further away from your purpose based on the decisions that you're making, but you're not ever going to be able to grab it. And so, like, when Garrett talks about these purpose-driven people, he's like, I just think it's important to note, we didn't ask any of them what their purpose was, because we were not purpose-driven people. We were goal-oriented people because we were salespeople. We
started looking for what do these great sellers, these great leaders, what do they do for goal setting? And like, we were talking to the CMO of Atlassian, which is a huge global company, 250,000 customers. And literally, I think it was 32 seconds into the interview, if you watch the tape of this interview, he's like beautifully articulating his purpose and talking about why it impacts who he works with and the companies that he works for and everything that he does in work and in his personal life. And so the takeaway before Colin tells this story is that, yes, we all have goals, and goals are important. It's really important to be a person who sets goals. But what these great people were doing was also articulating why they were doing what they were doing, and then tying their goals to that and setting purpose-driven goals. So if your goal is to, sell 50 houses in June, great, that's a fantastic goal, but it's missing half of the equation. My goal is to sell 50 houses in June so that I can, or because, and then have that purpose defined and tie that original goal back to the purpose. That's what all these people were doing. And it's a practice that we've taken away from it since. So Colin, I will defer to you for the final story that articulates somebody who had this purpose and what it led to, and then we can take some questions.
Cool. And just make sure that, the listeners focus on the outcome of being purpose-driven. Like, think about that. Like, here's a really good example from like a real world experience with Ruth. Our purpose, Garrett and my purpose, is to change the way that the world views salespeople by changing the way that people view themselves. Okay. We caught a vibe with Ruth on minute one, day one, because we saw our purpose in Ruth. Because if Ruth believes in us and is giving us a platform to talk about our book, then Ruth is helping us fulfill our purpose. So if you want to know why some of these great salespeople are so good and they just get in the room and it's like they're the only person in the room talking to you and they have this magnetic energy and some people are just born with it. No, that's not it. These people see their purpose in you. And so they talk to you differently. That's it. It's either that or real recognizes real, and one purpose-driven person knows what another one looks like. And so we give ourselves permission to talk like a real one. And all we ever want is just to be in the room with a real one. Okay, here's the last story. Back in the day at Bidium, one of the best salespeople in the room, Bidium's this company we're working at and got acquired by Google in the software security space. And one of the best salespeople at the time came up to me and said, "Hey, you got a rookie and he's hoarding leads and you better figure it out." Like when I come in the morning, he's already there. Everything in San Francisco is already in his name in the CRM. When I leave, he's prospecting into Sydney, Australia. So like the only thing I have left is the Outback. You better figure this out because he's hoarding leads. And this is the number one hitter. So I'm like, you know what? I'll figure it out. I got you. Tell the rookie to come into my office. Let's have a meeting. I got this like really beautiful, like brown restoration hardware couch in the office. And I say it like it's mine, Garrett, but the office's couch. And this gentleman sits on the couch and I'm about to tell him, that there's an issue. And I'm like, so look, hey, I want to talk to you about, and before I could get the words out of my mouth, he's going like this. He's like rubbing his tuchus back and forth on this couch. And we all know, like, we are weird. We, meaning salespeople, since everyone's a salesperson, I said everyone is weird. But this particular person showed up very weird this day. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "Yeah, this is just a really nice couch." I'm like, "Okay. All right, so look, here's what I want to talk to you about." He gets up before I can say it, starts flipping over couch cushions, okay? Finds the tag, puts the couch cushion back on, puts the laptop on his lap, starts going on LinkedIn and looking up the company, looks up at me, big bright-eyed, and goes, "They have 5,000 employees. There's no way that they're not using cloud apps. You care if I prospect into them later?" And I laugh. And I'm like, "No, of course not. You can definitely prospect into them." Sits down, buttoned up. "All right, Colin, what do you want to talk about?" And my response to him was absolutely nothing, because this guy found deals in couch cushions. This is an opportunity to talk about the difference between abundance and scarcity, and we're not going to talk about it because there's plenty of great books on it. But if you want to see the mark of a great salesperson, it's the person that sees opportunities where nobody else does. This guy would drive to Vegas because he was a rager, and he would call me or text me or send pictures of big rigs driving, of names of companies you've never heard of before. And then he would be Googling them and looking at them on LinkedIn and seeing how many employees they had and cold prospecting into them. So if you want a magical power, like a superpower, it has nothing to do with the right side of the equal sign. It is how you're thinking about sales. And this particular person saw opportunities where nobody else did.
It's such a perfect place to end because it takes us full circle. We talked about looking for the good, and the people that are listening to this or watching this know that selling is hard, and there's good times and there's bad times and there's ups and there's downs. And so training yourself to look for the good by having a purpose is a great way to level out some of those ups and downs. So thank you all for letting us live out our purpose up here and talk to you today. We promised you 15 minutes of questions. It looks like we've got a little more than 5. I apologize for that. But like I said, we are easy to find. So if we don't get to anything in the next 5 minutes, please find us out on social media or at our website, and we can talk anytime.
I'm going to ask a couple things, but just for everyone out there, several of the stories that you told are all in the book, but the book actually explains how Colin and Garrett came to this unsold mindset idea through stories, through real life stories. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important in real estate. That's how we tell and sell is through real life stories, which generally can be purpose driven. I have found some difficulty myself in with things you said, like authenticity and having passion. One has to have passion. And this guy who you're talking about, driving, looking for sales and driving by and seeing a name on a truck you never heard of. I mean, that's huge initiative. So I think that from that initiative comes the idea that what you're doing is really going to help someone. And of course, real estate is, I mean, that goes without saying in a way. Doesn't everyone need somewhere to live somehow? And at the same time, maybe people think they can solve their own problem. I mean, I look at things as a problem to solve. And I think that, how am I going to solve your problem or whatever? And in a way, be purpose driven to do that. And I guess what I noticed is a lot of people want to approach it as a conquest instead of an initiative to make someone's life better. I hear people talking about, I'm going to win. I won. I got this deal. I got that deal. What do you say to that about the idea of winning? I mean, because I think the idea of winning in sales is whether it should be or not is huge.
Yeah. I'll go first on this because I'm split. Garrett and I talk a lot about the chase is the best part. That the best part of the movie is the middle of the movie. It's not the ending when, you win or when you get the love interest. Like, we pay to see the middle of the movie, the ups and downs. And so in that regard, I think that it makes sense for someone to manufacture a conquest so that they can live in the best part of the movie. The downside to that is that they're viewing it as a win, which means that someone has to lose. And so Garrett and I talk a lot about the difference between acting like a coach and acting like a teammate. Everybody wants to be a coach, but there's also a hierarchy when it comes to a coach and a player. But like, maybe what people need is a teammate. Not that you can't win with a teammate. The only way you can win with a teammate is winning together. And so that's what I would say. I'd say the chase is the best part. And listen, if you're going to win, then be a teammate, because you're not going to win long-term at scale if you're beating the person that you're trying to, get to look for the good in you and believe in you and what you're saying and what you're selling.
That's exactly it, is the long-term play. Like, we've seen plenty of great sellers in every industry, and you probably all have too, where, it's a competition and I'm going to win this deal. I'm going to win this customer. And that lasts for a while, but we don't have time to get into the science behind it, but there's a lot of burnout that stems from that kind of thinking. Whereas over time, if you're doing what Colin just mentioned and you're thinking like a teammate, and you'd go back to all the stuff that we just talked about for that last half hour about falling in love and about seeing your purpose in other people, you're gonna come across very differently. It's going to be a lot more satisfying for you long term, but also you're gonna see more success because the questions you ask are going to be deeper. The solutions that you find, the creativity that you use to find solutions is going to be different. And that's really when Colin talks about the difference between a teammate and either a coach or, even worse, a competitor. That's what he's talking about.
Okay. I think it's so interesting, and why all of this is fascinating to me. I guess my other question would be, how do you, and you covered some of this, but how do you really teach someone to be like this? Because this is a mindset, a mentality.
Mhm.
It's like, you can talk to me, tell me 15 stories or whatever. If I don't have it, I don't have it, And so how can I get this? Do you do things so people can learn this through interactive ways that they like Colin talked about, the guy that he made do the prospecting, to the prospect he didn't want to, and then of course he sold them. Is that, can you make someone or how do you teach them? I'm very curious because, I teach a lot of courses, and of course sales is part of it to some degree, although I would like to defer to you because I don't think I'm really, that kind of good at that. But mindset and having that kind of thing, I think I am good at. I think I can ask the right questions, but to help somebody, but I can't make them. Yeah. So what do we do?
Yeah. So this is an exercise in self-awareness. That's what this is. You're not self-aware if you listen more as opposed to waiting to speak less. You're self-aware if you stare in the mirror and you go, I'm the type of person that waits to speak and doesn't listen well. That's self-awareness. And so there's, whatever, there's how many people are listening to this right now. 20% of them on average are going to consume this content a lot differently than the 80%. Like think about that. Like if everyone in the world, if everyone at any particular agency has access to the same trainings, has access to the same internet, the same books, the same TED Talks, why is it only 20% of them are thriving and the other 80% are trying to figure it out? It's how they're ingesting the content. It's that they're self-aware enough to know that they're being learners and that they're taking the content and they're trying to figure it out, as opposed to the 80% that are not self-aware enough to realize that they're looking at it like now they have the answers, they know the answers, they're knowers, and they're going to go out and act like the person that they just read about in this book. It all comes back to self-awareness, and self-awareness is earned, but it's also, sort of lived. I think, Garrett, you talk a lot
Yeah,
about
that's what part of your question is, can this be taught, right? And how is it taught? And how do we teach it? Fortunately, the answer is yes, it can be taught. And we teach the way we teach it depends on who we're teaching it to and how deeply ingrained their bad habits are. But a lot of what Colin's just talking about comes down to emotional intelligence and EQ. IQ, there's relatively decent science that says that your IQ is generally fixed throughout your life. Like there is a ceiling to how
debatable, but yeah,
it is debatable.
It's debatable.
But there, it fluctuates much less. Your EQ, your emotional intelligence, your emotional quotient can go up substantially as life goes on and as you get older. And that makes sense because the things that make up EQ, including self-awareness, these are all things that develop with experience and with knowledge. So, I mean, I know I'm speaking for myself, but I probably speak for most people here where if you look back 20 years, you were not as emotionally intelligent as you are now. And that's growth. And that's what we're talking about. So it can be taught. And there are certainly ways to accelerate it. What those ways are and how we do it sort of depends on a case-by-case basis. But that's where we live. It's what we love to do.
I'll give you your takeaway, Ruth. One way to actually train this is to celebrate the process.
Great one.
We've been in rooms before where they have like hang up hangouts, where they're celebrating who got hung up on the worst. Like the idea of celebrating making mistakes as a culture is one great way to be self-aware, to never make the same mistake twice.
Love that.
Celebrate making mistakes. Yeah. So
that's a good one.
That's one way. You can also read the book. There's a lot of activities and ways to.
Yes, I have done that a few times. Yes, no, I agree, and I'm asking for for the benefit of everybody. But I had to laugh because you don't know this, but the first thing I say in my class, I have a very long 2-part class that I'm in the process of making digital that teaches about real estate and how to do real estate business and mindset and all the growth mindset and all this stuff. And the first thing I say is listening is not waiting to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's one of the biggest problems here. And it's hard. It's hard to do, because we all think, oh, I know. I remember the kid in school that was like, and I mean, maybe you're younger than I am, but we still had that. I think you still have that, kids doing that. So
Colin was that kid for sure. Yeah.
Garrett's still that kid. Yeah.
And you had friends? You did, right?
just each other. Yeah, that's why this works.
Yeah, well,
but look,
anyway.
In that vein though, like that is self-awareness, right? Like Garrett helps me be more of a self-aware person by calling me out when I'm doing things that I am not aware that I'm doing, and vice versa. Yeah. So like self-awareness is not some like individual journey. The idea is, how do you put people around you? How do you create the infrastructure? An honest, vulnerable, authentic environment, where making mistakes is celebrated. Making the same mistake twice is a problem. Like you can be revenue centric or sales centric and still be mission driven. You can have goals and still, have a purpose that's attached. Like at the end of the day, like you were not going to be at a loss of great sales books. Okay, they're all over. They'll teach you how to handle objections. They'll teach you how to,
Indeed.
do all that
Indeed.
stuff.
Yeah. Well, I
Cool.
guess what I, oh, I'm sorry.
We're over time.
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
over time, and I see some people slowly dropping off. So I wanted to let people know, if we didn't get to a question that you had,
Yeah.
and you need to find us, we are on LinkedIn as ourselves. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Colin and Garrett. Also, colinandgarrett.com has all the info about the
Want to
things
put
that we
your
do, so.
put your website in the chat for people,
Sure.
because a couple people, and I think that would be great. And yeah, that's great.
So
Well,
thank you all for hanging out with us a little bit here on a Tuesday, and thank you, Ruth, for setting this up and making this happen. We appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you, and I hope all of you who are listening or still listening, that you go out there, hear the book, change the way, little by little, change the way you're telling your stories, and be purpose driven. That's all I can say. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Appreciate it. Love you all.
Yes.